Hi, everybody. This is Joanne with Read Science, and I'm joined, as always, with my co-host Jeff Schomeyer, sitting in Maryland. I'm in Illinois, and our guest today is in Ireland. So it's mid-afternoon or something for you, right?
Late afternoon. I'll have to look at my watch. That's how old I'm getting. Yeah, it's after 4 in the afternoon, so.
Yeah, it's still my morning, so when we get done, I have plenty of the day left, right? So today we are talking with Dr. Grimes, right? I don't want to say it wrong. I was
no, you said it perfectly.
What if it was Grimace or something?
I once got an ID. I was working in a hospital years ago, and they printed the ID with Davy Grimes, which I quite liked, but they made me give it back because it wasn't my name. So fair.
So you've written actually a couple of books, and we are sort of going to be talking about both of them because they're different versions of the same book. So today I have the US version of your book called Good Thinking. And then we get to follow the fun arrows in the flow chart that says why flawed logic puts us all at risk and how critical thinking can save the world. Your UK version is called The Irrational Ape, but I think the same subtitle, right?
It had originally the same subtitle, but the new edition has a new subtitle. Just confuse anyone that wants to try and peruse the back catalog, because why would make things straightforward? Why do anything logical like that?
Like, you mean new version as in paperback?
Yeah, I think the new one is about disinformation propaganda, how we avoid falling for disinformation propaganda conspiracy theory, because obviously the last year has rammed home some of the points that I talked about in the book when the UK edition were hypothetical have now become very, very real.
Very real.
So I think my publisher decided time to point that out very, very bluntly on the cover.
So actually, I'm going to read your bio because there may be people out there who don't quite know who you are. So let's take a look. We've got Dr. David Robert Grimes is a physicist, cancer researcher, and science journalist, many hats. Is affiliated with Dublin City University and University of Oxford. He contributes to both the BBC and RTE discussing science, politics, and media, and has contributed to The Guardian, The Irish Times, the BBC, PBS, and the New York Times, among others. He also advises on science policy and was a joint recipient of the 2014 Nature Sense About Science Maddox Prize for Standing Up for Science. And I think as we go along, we may find out why people need to stand up for science, and it can actually be a little dangerous, which makes no sense.
We live in a post-truth world, getting cold. So, I mean, maybe kind of inevitable, but we'll find out as we go.
We'll answer all the questions.
Okay, Jeff.
You've given us a very nice survey of logical fallacies, conspiratorial thinking, all the things that some of us think of as bad things and other people deny that they do them, and lots of good examples. And I expect those will come up. And I was trying to figure out just where I wanted to start. And I was reminded that here in America, at least, and you can tell me about the UK and Ireland and Great Britain if you want, we have a long history since our founding, at least, of intense anti-intellectualism as a thing that is sometimes greatly valued. And many writers have noted that. And I suspect we may have imported that in colonial and earlier times from the homeland. But I don't know. And then I thought, rather than starting with all the things that can go wrong, maybe we should start at a sort of top level thing of why we think, all of us here in this box today, think that critical thinking, rational analysis are the way to go, and what it is that is being talked about there even. And then we can start to take it apart in that usual scientist's reductive method. To the extent that you like,
and just poking at it. Do you know what, Jeff? That's a brilliant observation you've made about anti-intellectualism, because I was only thinking about this recently, and you point out America has a tradition of it, but I would say that Europe does to an extent as well, and in particular times. So one of my favorite authors is Umberto Eco, the Italian philosopher. and he wrote a book on the 14 traits of what he called fascism, like the prototypical kind of movement to denigrate and control. And one of the tenets that I found in that really shook me was to denigrate experts, to basically dismiss people that knew more, to dismiss science, to dismiss authority, is fundamentally something that crops up an awful lot in history. During the Great Terror after the French Revolution, there was, when they were executing some of the most well-known aristocratic chemists and physicists and people like that, the argument made by some of Robespierre's men was, we have no need for genius. And obviously it sounds much better in French, and my French is poor, so I won't try to do the translation. But it's a real thing, and you see it. You saw during the Brexit referendum, Michael Gove saying we've had enough of experts in the UK. And I think one of the reasons that critical thinking is so denigrated in certain environments is that without analytical thought, you become very pliable to demagogues, to charlatans, to people that wish to take advantage of you. And I would argue that, going to answer your other question, the only shield we have, the only, to use Sagan's term, the only candle in the dark we have against, I know he should copyright that, but God rest.
I was going to use it when I asked the question, but I forgot to mention it. But
I'm happy to definitely tip my hat to Sagan's influence on my thinking.
It's a very good book.
The only shield we have against people that would do us harm is that ability to stop and go, no, hang on, is that true? Should I subscribe to that? When that fails, the great Voltairean quote that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. We have seen that, and in recent American political history, that's quite raw. I mean, we can't but think of things like Charlottesburg and that march to see what, even the 6th of January this year, when people start embracing outlandish ideas. I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. I'm sorry, but one of my favorite philosophers is a guy called W.V. Quine, and he wrote about our web of belief, and this is the idea that all of our beliefs are intimately interconnected. And if you think it's like a spider's web, to pull on one thing, if I decide that I want to believe, so I'll take politics out of it for a second. Let's say I really want to believe that alternative medicine works. Well, then I have to weaken my justificatory beliefs in, why does science say this doesn't work? Well, I have to weaken my belief in science, and I have to weaken my belief in medical authorities. We're living in the COVID era where we've seen people literally deny science to a huge degree. And we also know that has affected their health and the health of people around them. So these aren't things in isolation. I'm often asked by people, what's the big deal if people believe silly things? I say, well, we all live in a society. And if you're living in a society with someone who doesn't accept basic facts, their vote matters every bit as much as yours. So how do we arrive on big problems like climate change or how we deal with global pandemics? How can we hope to come up with good solutions if we can't even agree on basic facts? And that, I guess, was the motivation for me.
Problems that affect the world and society and things. And now, my apologies, because that was at least 5 more follow-on questions in there of, well, if you have anti-intellectualism, you can see is good for leaders with authoritarian inclinations. What convinces the followers? I don't know. We may get to that. What was the other thing we were? Oh, and I am very glad that you brought up this idea of the web and things, because I usually think of science as, all of science is this web of interdependent facts that all support each other, and the extent now is huge, and that's usually where I start, although it's hard to explain to the person who, I don't know, sidles up to a young graduate student in the bar and say, let me tell you where Einstein got it wrong. It's like, it's no longer possible to say this is where Einstein got it wrong, and so whatever. It's like you can't do that. It's part of a huge thing that all has worked together for hundreds of years and been built. And it's like, if you want the wall, you have to accept the bricks or something.
That's a really nice analogy. I quite like that.
Well,
I might steal that, but I will credit you.
You may. I can tell you where that came from. I've used that for about 20 years, I think. Oh, shoot. I should try to make a question out of that. I don't know how do they anti-intellectual leaders get the anti-intellectual followers to go with them? Is just everybody going around with anti-intellectual inclinations?
Well, I think that actually there's that was when I started writing this. I got into, I suppose, communicating science kind of by accident. Early or about when I was in my early 20s and didn't know anything about anything. I still know very little about anything. I just am more cynical.
It gets worse.
There you go. Yeah, I know. I'm more aware of my intellectual shortcomings, and that's okay. I mean, that's some people never become aware of them, so at least on that. But one of the things that was a massive eye opener to me was that it is very tempting for people that are inclined towards science, and I imagine most of the viewers today will be inclined towards science, to think that everything is an information deficit kind of problem, that it's just people don't know enough and we'll go out there with the information. But the Yale, there's kind of an interesting approach to this. Information is not neutral, right? Nothing in isolation is that neutral. We all put it into our cognitive basket or our little thing. So our own psychology comes a massive, massive impact. So let's say let's go with something that does happen. Let's say I am a hardcore libertarian tech bro. I'm not, thank God. But let's say Grimes, I'm not, that Elon Musk's wife is actually not really a Grimes.
Yes.
That out. But I'm not married into that family, just in case anyone might think. But
her name is different. She changed it. So.
And let's say you suddenly come up with a problem like climate change. Now, your fundamental motivating philosophy is regulation is something that you are not really all for. And now I'm telling you that your freedom is impinging on other people's life and the world itself. You have two options then, okay? And one of them is really, really difficult, and one of them is really easy. The difficult one is to go, wow, you're right. There's an extra boundary or regulation in my philosophy that requires me to update my prior belief, reflect on it, and then find a version of my philosophy that can take into account this exception or this whatever else. That's an intellectually honest way to deal with things. That's hard. That's really hard. The easier thing to do is to deny, dismiss, downplay, or rubbish the problem. And this is what psychologists refer to as motivated reasoning, that you already have a vision of the world and you're trying to cherry pick the aspects that resonate with you. Because when you come across information that jars, and you as both as scientists have definitely had this happen to you, you really think you have something and you got this down, and then something just throws a spanner in the works and you go, bloody hell, how do I deal with this? And the honest way, if you're being a good scientist, which you folks no doubt are, but not everyone is, you go, all right, well, I need to account for that or work out what, update the bounds or the limitations. It is far easier cognitively to dismiss that. So that's why you have people who deny climate change or even denying COVID. When I deal with people who are COVID skeptics, like I was writing in Scientific American about this a while ago, and one of the things I said was you're often dealing with people who are scared and want to feel like they have control over the situation, and perversely believing that Bill Gates or George Soros is pulling the strings is perversely more reassuring than realizing that we are more at the mercy of randomosity than we might like to admit.
Right. So invisible virus.
Yeah. So
That's
the
scary,
honesty,
somebody wasn't even alive has done this.
The honesty is the harder path then. And almost always, I guess.
Absolutely. And the other thing as well, and you know what? Have you ever said something to someone and they've gotten really offended and you're like, what? And you realize that whether you meant to or not, you undermined their belief system. Now, on paper, we shouldn't do that, right? Our ideas are just ideas. We shouldn't care. But there is research from I always mix up Daniel Kahneman with Dan Cannon I'm talking about the guy from Yale. But his research has I think I discovered this late, but it was fundamental to how I now approach things. The idea of identity protective cognition, that we to some extent embody our ideas. They become us. They become what defines us. So therefore, an attack on our philosophy, our idea, our pre-existing beliefs, even if someone is not actually attacking them, they're just saying that's actually not fully true. It's that can come across as a personal affront. And I'm not into sports at all. So I realized this years ago when people would be into a sports team and I go, yeah, but they're not very good, are they? I mean, people get very offended. And I'd be like, yeah, but look at the batting averages or whatever. This is terrible. I've realized now that when sports comes up, I just nod and pretend I know nothing because I do know nothing. It's not my thing. But that I was failing to see that they identified with that and that was part of their psychological makeup. And these problems, this motivated reasoning and this identity predictive cognition, both make it very easy to get anti-intellectual, and work, it makes it really difficult to change your mind.
Mhm.
If you've now put that as your armor and this is you, this is what you go around in the world saying, this is me, changing your mind looks like a come down or like a walk back.
Mhm.
And it shouldn't. We should be positively patting people on the back for changing their minds, high-fiving everyone for changing their minds. Instead, we look at it as weakness. And that,
Right.
I think, is fundamentally a problem that feeds into anti-intellectualism.
Well,
Right.
then the question, as I first said, is so who are you to tell me that you think rational thought and critical thinking and rational analysis is better for us somehow?
Well, I mean, I'll try to answer that, but the
Or
first part
why
of
is it better?
Why is it better? Yeah.
I shouldn't appeal to authority. Sorry, but
No, that's quite all right. So I think one of the reasons is what people often think this is very abstract, and it's like, well, this is, and it does seem abstract, which is why in the book I said stories matter.
Yeah.
No one, you could write a field guide with all these general heuristics and say this is what you should do and whatever else, and you know what, it wouldn't mean anything to people. But when you see in a story, and I think humans are storytellers. We understand stories. We understand anecdotes. We understand little things like that. But I think if you show people that this is really liberating, because you give people examples of where if you don't use critical thinking, it's very easy to be misled. And you can show that. You can, if you want, you can take out the pen and paper and do the Bayesian inference. You can do all that kind of jazz. But then what you say to people, instead of selling it as a detriment and go, oh, that's really complicated and archaic, you say, no. This is so liberating. And it's not just about understanding science or COVID or vaccination or health policy or any of that kind of stuff. It's about deciding what car you buy. It's about deciding, what choices you should make on a personal level that will most benefit or most achieve the goals you want. And it turns out the same fundamental set of tools underpin all of that. And the same mistakes, no matter whether you're talking about politics or science or anything else, the same set of mistakes plague us as humans because we are, to use the UK title, we are rational apes. I include myself in that, by the way. I did once get a bit of hate mail. I get quite a lot. And I got one bit that said, oh, you think you're better than us. And I had to put it, no, every mistake in this book I have made repeatedly. And I would wager that almost any human being going has made these mistakes. So it's absolutely a case of it. And I mean, one of the jokes is, why do we not call it the irrational ape in the US? Well, remember, evolution is still contentious in wide swathes of the US. There's a fascinating history of that as well, why that is the case. But again, that we are a little, so just, I mean, I imagine most of the viewers of this show are going to be fully on board with evolution, but at the same time, it is to point out that, yeah, we have flaws in our cognitive mesh that can definitely bring us to bad outcomes. And I think that we have to sell it as a benefit thing. If we don't use critical thinking, we tend to achieve poorer and poorer outcomes. It's like prepping for a job interview. If you just go in, half-cocked, you're probably going to make a mess of it. But if you do a little bit of homework, you can really maximize your outcome. And critical thinking is that on a bigger scale. But I mean, I think you have to realize it's so liberating. It's not an imposition. It's a liberation. I'm not sure if I'm selling that very well, but I hope.
And so the awareness deficit, the deficit of understanding, is not so much in facts. It's a meta deficit of understanding process and what to do with inputs to get at things that we might agree are facts.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you realize, I mean, what made me start writing this down was when I started writing articles. And again, I went in with this naive, I was 22, 23 years old, information deficit model stuff. And when you get your first angry screed of hate mail, you're like, hang on a sec.
Yeah.
What in God's green earth upset you there, right? And then you realize there's all this other stuff. But I started noticing, no matter what I was writing about, whether it's vaccination, whether it was about homeopathy, whether it was about nuclear power, the same series of mistakes were underpinning all of them. And I noticed in my own thinking, hey, the way I used to think about that was wrong because I did it this way. And then I said, hang on, these are really kind of universal. I also talked a lot to belief psychologists because initially I was not even dismissive of psychology. I'm like, "Oh, I do the thing that sometimes scientists do. We can get a little bit arrogant about fields that aren't our own and go,
Or a lot.
and my ex-partner and now one of my best friends is a belief psychologist. So we had long conversations where she's like, you do have to think about this. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess you do. And this is the whole argument where humanities and science need to work together on things an awful lot. Not to say psychology isn't a science, it most definitely is. But, communication matters. How things are going to be understood matters every bit as much as the hard data behind it. So that was a humbling experience for sure, but a very important learning one.
The intensity of those reactions seems incredible until perhaps, as you suggest, we trace it to attacking the person's identity, which is buried underneath this matrix of beliefs.
Right. And it's easy to put your foot in that landmine by mistake.
Yeah.
I put across you there. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for people who hate marking up books, sorry, I did it.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, she wrote in a book. But I'm just showing I don't know if you guys could see the blue underline. She can't read it. It's okay. But I just want to show the whole book where I underlined. These are the fallacies, the logic flaws. They all have names, and there's so many of them.
There's so
right?
many.
That's the thing. It's like you broke it down and you said, okay, we've got errors in logic, the fallacy of the undistributed middle. So every sort of flawed way of looking at thing actually has a name, thanks probably to psychology and philosophy, right?
But with the useful addition of stories to
exactly
to illuminate and inform.
So the words that aren't underlined talk about the topics and the stories that go with it. But I was like, oh wow, there is so much in here, and I should have made a nice table and put it online, but I didn't.
Can we? There's some reasons that we wanted. Joanne and I wanted to talk today about the controversial things, so-called controversial things you get involved with, and the I don't know, throwing battery acid on you attacks that people get into. And I thought maybe it would be interesting to summarize the great flat Earth controversy fight between Wallace and Hampton, how that came out, and what Wallace, to his amazement, as an unsuspecting person stepping on the landmine, what was going on with that?
Hey, do you know that's interesting? And Wallace himself, Alfred Russel Wallace, is an interesting character because obviously co-discoverer of evolution, was in constant conversation with Darwin, but also was an ardent anti-vaxxer later on. So I mean, people can have bits of their, but that's neither here nor there. This particular debate, he saw an ad. He was a bit short of cash, and he saw an ad basically from a biblical literist, which, by the way, biblical literacy, or is believing the Bible to be inerrant, is actually quite a new thing. It's late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, even in the Middle Ages, the church knew that the Bible was mainly allegory, but somehow that got lost in translation. Anyway, he said basically a challenge to prove that the Earth was a sphere, and we'd known this since time of Eratosthenes or whatever, back in 3,000 years ago, that this is definitely a sphere.
Eratosthenes, right?
Thank you. That's how you pronounce it. I was thinking in my hair, I can see it written down. Like, and I did the mumbly thing, and you caught me. But one of the things that he said, this is easy money, but he made a very fundamental mistake, because he went out there and did the classic experiment to show curvature, which we all know, and I won't bore people with, but you can basically show the horizon disappearing, and you can get a big enough body of water, put lights on it. Yeah. But no matter what evidence he gave to his challenger, he wouldn't accept it, and he wouldn't pay up the bet. And he got more and more aggressive with him. In the end, it ended up with him being, I think it was Hampton was the guy's name, him actually being arrested for threatening bodily harm. I think I put it in the book. It's really graphic how he threatened harm against him.
Yes.
And Alfred Russel Wallace then lamented that he'd spent about 15 years of his life and then all this money on legal fees against this. What he learned in the very hard way was that you have to pick your battles. You have
Right.
to work. If someone is not engaging with you in good faith, there's no point in doing it. I do a series of videos on Instagram, and the most thing I'm commonly asked is, if I'm dealing with someone who believes in conspiracy theories, what should I do?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say the very first thing, if you're having a conversation with them, is to ascertain whether they're amenable to having a conversation about it, or whether they are absolutely only willing to get converts. And that's really hard to do, particularly with family members. But choosing your battles is important, because you could spend all your time going online and throwing angry comments at people and saying you're an idiot, and it's nowhere. It's just going to, it's white noise. Your efforts are much better focused on talking to people that have concerns, that have fears, that have questions. But and I always point out that when it comes to, I did a paper on this recently in Plus One, and I argued that belief in medicine and science is a spectrum. The same way we know that vaccine hesitancy is a spectrum, I would say acceptance of medico-scientific concepts is on a spectrum. It's not that someone is pro-science or anti-science. They might be the extremes. But the vast majority of people maybe don't have a strong opinion and float in the middle. And that will be influenced and nudged by what they read online, what they're shared, if they are exposed to conspiracy theories, which we know has a massive impact. That's why I do so much of my work on conspiracy theories. We know it has a massive impact on how people perceive the world around them. Right. So I think that if you get someone who's in the middle of the spectrum, maybe leaning towards being anti-science or anti-vaccine, that you can still talk to them and you can still have conversations. And I think in my experience, I talk to vaccine hesitant parents all the time, particularly on the HPV vaccine, which is massive, personally important to me. I talk to them, and what I often find is it's fear. They've heard scary things, and that fear, misinformation, propaganda has frightened them. And what you really need to do is, if you dismiss them or get angry at them, they're not going to listen to you. But if you hear their fear and go, that's really interesting. What if I showed you this? Would that help? What if I put you? And I found those conversations really, really work. But I would say debate doesn't. And I would say social media, unfortunately, has turned it into a Punch and Judy show, a real debate thing. And we might have learned from, looking at Eton College and all the House of Commons in the UK, that this kind of theatrical oration stuff is what works, because we have a classical image of from archaic Greece that it was all debate. I would say discourse is far more important than debate, because debate already puts you in a position. It forces you to not be able to climb down or change your mind. But if we have a discussion, we can change our minds. And no one faults us for it. If it's like, I'm against you and we're against this, your personal feelings get locked into that. And it's impossible to divorce them from. So when I get asked, by media outlets now, oh, will you do a debate against X, Y, and Z? I will often tell them no. And I will say, I will go on and discuss that for sure. I said, I'll have a conversation with someone about it, but I'm not going on to, and particularly if it's something like vaccination, I will say absolutely no, that's false balance. If they're saying, will you debate this anti-vaxxer? I'll be like, no, and you shouldn't be entertaining that, because you don't debate the existence of Greenland. You can talk about why people believe in vaccine and why people are afraid of it. That's a great discussion. That's public service to do. But if you want to say, let's debate a fact, again, I don't understand the purpose of debating a fact. And that's what I now that I'm a bit older and wiser, I have to say that to producers an awful lot, which is I wouldn't host that segment if I were you. I would not do that, which means I'm denying myself, any appearance fee, but it's more important to do. And also appearance fees are rare and not worth, particularly in Europe, they're not really worth anything. You're
well,
20 euro for showing up. Hey.
Well, I think, US doesn't even provide that. So
okay.